Hey everyone, Adam here. Before today's show, I ask you all please to go over to my Instagram and give me a follow at Behind the Life Podcast. I'm also now on Twitter at Behind the Life 3. You can now listen to all episodes on Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, and just say, Alexa, play Behind the Life Podcast. Enjoy today's episode. On today's show, I'm going behind the life of Danny De Brabander, a terminal cancer sufferer who is fighting the biggest fight of his life. Danny is incredibly open and honest about his cancer and treatment on social media, having over 100,000 views on LinkedIn. Danny has set up a fundraising organisation focused on bowel cancer awareness called Team DDB that has thousands of followers on Instagram, including quite a few globally known people. Since the year 2000, Danny has gone through several traumas: a mental health sufferer, the loss of her fiancé, and a family member who died of cancer. In January 2019, Danny was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and he is here today to share his story and raise awareness of bowel cancer, the fourth most common cancer in the UK that over 40,000 people per year are diagnosed with. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of Behind the Life. Hey Danny, thanks so much for coming onto the show. Wanted to share your story of raising awareness of bowel cancer. Cancer is such a taboo subject, and it's brilliant that you've agreed to come on to Behind the Life. Firstly, I just want to ask, how are you getting on with the lockdown?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for asking me to come on. Really appreciate that. Lockdown-wise, I think it's tough, isn't it? Tough for everyone. For myself, I'm finding it's not been too much of a change because I'm only about 9 weeks from major liver surgery. I had 60% of my liver removed, so I think I would be still, at home and recovering from that, really. So from that point of view, it's not too dissimilar, but in the main and not being able to see certain family and friends, obviously it's tough.
Yeah, and touched on your cancer, obviously, which we, as I mentioned before, you were diagnosed with in 2019. Obviously, that would have changed your world upside down. Before that, let's just all look back on your life in a chronological order. So, where were you born, Danny? What was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I was born in Birkenhead on the Wirral. Had a good upbringing. No real dramas with that. Good family. My mum, Mal, my dad, Paul, and I've got a brother who's 5 years older, Simon. And as I said, just very tight-knit family and no major occurrences, really.
And then you were at college when you started to suffer from mental health issues with your anxiety.
Yeah, it was just after college, actually. I kind of broke off for the summer. As you do, you finish college and you kind of at loggerheads as to where you go from there. And I found I was staying in the house a lot. And then all of a sudden, it was actually at an Oasis concert, believe it or not. I went and all of a sudden started to feel really panicky. And from there, over months, it just developed into this real kind of sense of not wanting to leave the house. When I did leave the house, it would be panic attacks, feeling hot, feeling like I was going to be sick. And that, like I say, that kind of developed. And it was only through my dad kind of said, you can't just sit around. You're going to have to at least get some money in. So he said, sign on to the dole. So I did that because I just needed some money coming in. And when you'd go down, you'd always have to go down for meetings with your officer. And I found that when I'd go in, I'd have these major panic attacks. So it would just go on. And then at the time, I think there was a thing called New Deal, and it kind of forced me into going to get a placement at a housing association. And I did that. And as I said, I was still dealing with it, but it was getting better. And it was just something that I kind of managed myself, and eventually went into an insurance job, full-time insurance job. And it slowly went, but it was a tough time. And as I say, it was very mentally draining.
So when you were working at the housing association and you were dealing with your anxiety, did you realize what it was, and did you go and seek any support and help?
No, it was. I didn't really. Obviously, I knew it was anxiety related, but I mean, I'm going back to probably late 90s, early 2000, and it was kind of, it wasn't really spoken about, and it was something that I was almost embarrassed about as well. There's like kind of, I did feel like there was a real stigma around it, and although my mum and dad kind of knew, not many people did know, and it was tough, and I had some very low points throughout that. But yeah, no, I didn't speak to anyone, and it was only by constantly putting myself into circumstances that I eventually got over it, really.
And then a couple of years later, so 2001, you lost your granddad. Were you close to him, and how did that affect you?
Yeah, so leading back to really, a close knit family, that was also my nan and granddad. And my granddad, we were going to, or he was picking mum up for a football game. Healthy guy. I mean, he was in his 80s, but he was a healthy guy for his age. And he beeped the horn. By the time my mum had locked the door and come out, he was slumped on the wheel and he'd had a major heart attack. So
Wow.
that was tough. I think from my point of view, I was always very close to my nan and granddad. I had this thing where I'd go round to see them every Saturday morning. But on that morning, for some reason, I chose not to go, and that kind of, again, it's just one of those regrets that you have and sticks with you moving forward. But, I know that I was very close with him. So, I've kind of parked that now, but that kind of did niggle with me for a time as well.
So obviously you were, getting over the loss of your granddad, and you're going through these mental health issues, but your life turned for the better in 2002 when you met Lacey, who then went on to become your fiance. Just tell me how you met her, Danny.
Yeah, I went on a trip to New York, Las Vegas, and LA. Really good multi-trip holiday. And then when I was coming back from LAX airport, I saw her at the airport, and then coincidentally we ended up sitting next to each other on the flight. And then we got speaking, and she lived in Kent. And then it just blossomed from there. And then we'd spend every other weekend. I'd go down or she'd come up. But then she broke it to me not long after we got together that her family was planning to move to Las Vegas, and that's why they were over there anyway. So it kind of grew, and then not long before they were going to go, she said, "Do you want to come with me?" And that kind of led to me up sticks and moving to Las Vegas, which was quite a big
a
leap.
Change. Yeah. So what were your plans in Las Vegas? What were you going to do work-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite young and I kind of naively went into it, not really thinking. So I didn't actually have a visa. So what I had to do was go on like a 3-month visa, come home for a few weeks, and then go back again. And that went on for quite a time. It turned out I was doing a little bit of work for a dad, just cash in hand stuff. But yeah, not actually working. And then I said, this can't go on. I need to go home and get a visa and get some more money behind me. So I come back, and that kind of caused a little bit of tension in the relationship a bit, because obviously she wants me to stay there, but I couldn't risk, becoming what you would call an illegal immigrant or alien over there, really. So obviously I was playing it by the book, sensible as I always am. And so I come back here and found work here. So.
Okay, and so did you have plans to then go back over there?
Yeah, so the job that I actually do now, which is, 15 years down the line, the job I actually got now was my intention, which I don't really know if they know this at this point, but my intention was just to get there, to get some money behind me and then go back. Obviously, that didn't materialise, and yeah.
Yeah, and then you were obviously working over here, and you had a call one day in relation to Lacey. Can you just talk through what happened?
Yeah, so I come home from work and my brother was here. He wasn't living at home at the time, and he come in, and everyone just looked white as a sheet and just said like she'd been killed in a car accident in late at night in Las Vegas. So it was a massive shock, and obviously one that, again, like with my granddad, you have those kind of needling things where you think, well, if I'd have stayed, or would that have happened, and so on. And yeah, it was a really tough part of my life, really.
Well, you had two traumas in the space of 3 years, obviously with your granddad, and then losing your fiance in terrible circumstances. And then obviously you're dealing with that, and then a year later in 2005, you lost your nan to lung
Yeah,
cancer.
that's right. Yeah. So, and again, I was very close to my nan, so that kind of escalated quite quickly, really. And again, it was, I mean, there was a nice ending to that, really, in some ways. In that, on the day that she died, we went round, and her breath was getting slower and so on. And I was due to go home to have something to eat and then go back. But for whatever reason, something told me to stay there, and I was the only person there when my nan took her last breaths, really. So that was quite a poignant moment because, as I said, I was very close with her. So, but again, it was another kind of loss, and from having a childhood upbringing where, like I said at the start of the piece, there was no dramas. So all of a sudden, in the space of a few years, to lose three people who were very close to me, it was very kind of tough to take, really.
And was that the first time you really, was made more aware of cancer? Obviously people talk about it in day-to-day life, but until it really affects somebody close to them, they don't almost take it that serious.
Yeah, it did, and but it was kind of, I don't know whether it was just burying my head in the sand sometimes when she was going through it, and I could see that she was deteriorating. You kind of just think that it's not happening, if you like. So there wasn't, with my nan, and especially because she was older as well, there wasn't like a massive focus, being honest, though, at that time on the cancer side. Really, it was just more that she was unwell. But yeah, as you come to it, it's become obviously even more prevalent, really.
Absolutely. And then we fast forward a few years, Danny, to 2009, where you met the new love of your life, a lady called Jane. Where did you meet her?
So, believe it or not, Jane, the job that I'm in at the moment and the job that I come back to move there, Jane actually interviewed me for that role, and we worked together. So that was something that just kind of, for the first, I mean, between probably, from when Lacey died up to 2009, whilst I was seeing different girls from time to time, I almost felt there was like a pedestal and no one was comparing, and I was struggling, really, and I was kind of just putting all my time and effort into football matches, going to gigs, travelling and so on. And then, we kind of went out on a pool tournament with work, and it kind of blossomed from there, really. And she only lived round the corner from me, but we never really saw each other locally. But yeah, it developed from that, and haven't looked back since, really. And we've been together ever since then.
Yeah, brilliant. So you're quite a big sportsman, aren't you, Danny? So who do you support in football?
Yeah, I'm a Manchester United fan, which is a funny one with the accent that I've got. I'm a season ticket holder, so when I go to the game and I get speaking to lads from Manchester or Salford, they can't quite believe it, really. But it's something just that developed over kind of the 90s, I suppose you could say, a bit of glory hunting. But it was just, that with things like that, you see certain players, and then you go to Old Trafford and it just capsulates you, and it just felt right, really. Obviously I've got a soft spot for Tranmere with my mum. My mum's a big Tranmere fan, and growing up I went to a lot of Tranmere matches as well. But yeah, so I'm a Manchester United fan for my sins at the moment.
Did you woo Jane by taking her to a Manchester United game?
No, she's an Evertonian, actually. Yeah, so she's a massive Evertonian. So when we play each other, we obviously have our fun moments with that. And her son Josh, like I said, basically my stepson now. He's a big Evertonian as well. So I'm kind of outnumbered on that one.
That's great. The relationship with Jane was blossoming, and in 2012 she fell pregnant, Danny. So can you just talk through what happened?
Yeah, so it was something that we were aiming for, and yeah, it was quite early on, actually, in the pregnancy, but it did hit us hard, Jane especially. For me, like, even going back throughout all of like the grievances I've had, I've always been someone who's like a closed book. So I kind of, whilst we've talked about it, it's been, in some ways we haven't talked about it, and it's just been one of them things that's kind of was hard at the time, but we both kind of I don't know, it's a tough one, really. But yeah, just another tough period of my life, and something that maybe, you know, I closed down from, which maybe, you know, if I look back now, I kind of think I wish I hadn't really.
So, you know, in relation to the miscarriage, did you seek any support as a couple, or as you said, did you almost, sounds bad, taking on the chin and just, you know, distance yourself from, you know, feeling down and concerned about what happened?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of been the theme of well, up until recently, really. But it's kind of been the theme of just kind of, you know, you just kind of take it on the chin, like you said, and then just work through it and just carry on. And like I said, in hindsight, maybe, you know, looking back, that's probably not been the best thing in some parts, because I do think grief has a big impact, obviously psychologically, on a person. And when you're just trying to kind of mount it all on yourself, you know, that's I don't think that's the best idea, really. So if I could go back, that's probably one of the things in my life that I would change, that I would probably have spoken out more and seek more help on it, really.
Well, that's an interesting point, though, isn't it, Danny? You know, in relation to trauma, everybody deals with it differently. Some people are very open and they talk through it, and then some people are closed and believe they can deal with it themselves. If you could go back to that time, do you think you would have dealt with it differently?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I probably would say maybe I needed to have been there more for Jane, really. I don't know whether, I mean, she would tell you better than anything on that, but my kind of gut feeling on it is that maybe I should have been. And again, it was probably just from another kind of, felt like another loss, and it was just burying my head in the sand, if you like, and just kind of putting a brave face on things and carrying on, because that's kind of all I'd really known throughout all the griefs that I've had, really, is just you know, putting on a face, really.
And then we skip forward a few years to March of 2018. So we'll talk in relation to your cancer. You started to suffer some early symptoms of bowel cancer. For those people out there that are listening, and you know, everybody will have heard about cancer, but what are the actual symptoms? What was it that was, you know, that your body was doing to you?
Yeah, so I started to feel a bit like lethargic. I had like a heavy feeling towards the left-hand side of my stomach. Just kind of indigestion. I kind of just sensed there wasn't something quite right there. So I did go to the doctors, and the doctor said, "Oh, you need to have a blood test." Kind of played it down, really, at first, and said, "Oh, you know, it could be just a bit of IBS or something like that, irritable bowel syndrome or something like that." But said, "We'll send you for blood." So I kind of left the GP practice, and I've just thought, you know, it probably is something nothing, and I'll just leave it, really. So I kind of moved on. In a way, some ways stupid, because one of the things I've kind of maybe not said to you is a few years before that, my mum actually had bowel cancer herself. So she had it. Luckily, she caught it early enough, and which is a big part of bowel cancer in terms of survival. She got it early enough and had it basically cut out, and she had a ileostomy stoma for a period, and then she had that reversed. And look, you know, touch wood, and thankfully she's absolutely fine. But there was no like association between, oh, my mum had it, so maybe I've got it, it's hereditary. It was just more of, it won't affect me, that type of thing. It's just going to be irritable bowels. So I kind of left it, and months passed.
The symptoms that you suffered, were these the same that your mum suffered as well?
Yeah, so I think that with my mum, I think she got it early enough whereby it was just maybe fatigue, tiredness and fatigue, and a bit of achiness. So she followed through with the blood test from an early stage, and like I say, she caught it early, which is critical. For me, it was just more of, you know, I didn't feel right, but let's kind of move on. This won't affect me. Didn't put the two and two together that it was an hereditary thing. And then, yeah, it kind of went on for a few months, went away on a few trips, didn't feel quite right on the trips. But again, just not really putting two and two together. And it was only until I passed blood in my stool that I kind of thought, oh, there's something definitely up here. So I ended up going to medical, going back to the GP, following through blood tests, and then obviously doing a stool sample, and like that come back with signs that something wasn't quite right.
So I'm not one to stereotype, but you sort of started in March and then you didn't go to the GP till September. Was it almost the typical male thing of, you know what, there's nothing wrong with me, I'll be fine?
Yeah, definitely. And I also think there's kind of like a little bit of a stigma around with bowel cancer. I think, it's that thing of, it's talking about stool or poo or whatever shite or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of, there's that stigma around that as well. And it's an embarrassing thing to go to the doctors over, I find. So maybe there was part of that. And there was also part of, I think everyone, I don't know, it's a weird one, because even to today, and we'll obviously go on to that, I think everyone almost senses a feel of like invincibility, which obviously we're not, but you kind of think, oh, it'll never happen to me. So I just kind of downplayed it, really, even though I wasn't feeling well. It was quite weird, really.
And then January 2019, as you said, you went through all the tests, etc. When your life changed forever when you were diagnosed with bowel cancer, stage 4 bowel cancer. Just talk me through what it was like when you first heard the C word, and I don't mean the swear word.
Yeah, it was, I went for a camera early in January, which they put up your backside, of want of a better word. It's not a nice experience. And then I was just in the waiting room, just ready to go home. And then the nurse said, oh, the doctor wants to have a word with you before you go. And so he called me in. He said, we found something. And I kind of, when I had the camera, you can see it on the screen, and I could kind of see he was putting attention to something, and it didn't look good, which was kind of a surreal thing to see. But yeah, and then he just said that you've got bowel cancer. And it's just funny, I think, when I've been in that process, like a few times now where they've told me bad news, the way I've been taking that news has almost been like I'm in, a sales meeting, and I'm very like, oh, okay, that, and there's no real emotion. You can't, it's such a surreal experience to be told that, and it doesn't really hit you until days after.
And people talk about these different stages of cancer. So, as mentioned, yours was a stage 4. So, what does stage 4 mean?
So there's the initial staging would be where my mum was at. She would have been kind of stage 2. So it's caught within the initial kind of site of where the cancer is. Stage 3, I believe, is where it's gone to like lymph nodes, and it's spread a bit further out of the body or away from the initial site. Stage 4 is where it's gone to another organ. So in my case, I had some scans, and then I had it confirmed to me that it spread to my liver, which was obviously, again, a massive blow, because then you automatically go onto Google and you read the feedback on Google, and it's not nice, and it's very negative what you read on Google in terms of what your life expectancy will be with that type of diagnosis and spread, really.
So bowel cancer is, if caught early, it's one of the most curable cancers out there. But in the space of from March 2018 through to January 2019, so what's that, 7 months, it literally developed that quickly. Is that right?
I mean, it could potentially have been. It could potentially have been. The bowel could have been a few years before. It can be very slow growing. So by me delaying from March to obviously then being diagnosed in January, there's, not naively on it, but you probably would say that there's a very good chance that didn't help, and that may well have caused the spread. And that's why it's so important to get diagnosed early and get treatment early, like it did with my mum. But yeah, I mean, for all I know, I could have had the blood test in March time when I initially went in 2018, and I could be in the same position where I had the spread. In some ways, you've kind of got to get lucky, but obviously percentage chances if you go earlier, the more chances that it's not going to spread elsewhere.
Yeah. And then a couple of months later in March, you started chemotherapy. Again, for the people out there that don't know, they hear the word chemotherapy and they also hear the word radiotherapy. What is chemotherapy and what's it like going through that?
Yeah, so chemotherapy is treatments for cancer. It's normally either via like intravenous drip or via tablet form. So in March, I went to see an oncologist at Clatterbridge, and his plan of attack was to give me chemotherapy first, and then after so much chemotherapy, they would then look to do surgery on my bowel and my liver. And the idea being that to try and shrink it down maybe a little bit, but also I think the chemotherapy can potentially kill any cancer that's in your blood as well. So to stop the chance of it spreading in the future, or to delay it spreading in the future. So he put me on a course of chemotherapy and had the first one, and felt absolutely fine, which you often do on the first one. When I say felt fine, for the first few days. And actually, when I was building up, when I got my diagnosis, I thought, I'm going to eat healthily, I'm going to get fit, and that will all help me. So I'd started to jog, and I did the park run the week before I had chemotherapy. And then, believe it or not, I had the chemotherapy on the Friday, and on the Saturday morning, I went and did the 5K park run the day after, which was madness really at the time. But long story short, about 3 or 4 days after, and I started to take these tablets, I started to notice that whenever I'd stand up or I'd move, I'd go and have a shower or whatever, I'd find that I'd start to get like this really strange sensation in like my neck and in my hand and my arm, almost like a numbness and like a burning sensation, like indigestion. So I spoke to a nurse, and she said, "Oh, it sounds like you've just got indigestion, which is one of the common side effects of the chemotherapy." So that went on for days, and I was slowly feeling worse and worse. So I spoke to one of the chemotherapy nurses who was under my oncologist, and she said, as soon as I told her I was getting this feeling in my wrist, she said, "Get up to A&E straight away." So I went up and got put on a bed, and he did an ECG, and before I knew it, there was about 5 or 6 different nurses all looking at the ECG results. Like, couldn't believe what the results were showing, because obviously it must have been dipping out and spiking or whatever it does, and ended up 5 days in hospital. And he said, like, if I hadn't have gone in, I was heading towards a major heart attack, which was quite scary really. And then as you can imagine, once I come out of hospital, I was told that chemotherapy would be scrapped and I would be heading towards surgery. So that was the next plan.
Wow. But then in April, so the following months, this was your health got even worse when you suffered sepsis.
Yeah, so with having a growth in my bowel, one of the concerns they had was that the growth in the bowel would grow that big that it would actually block my bowel. So I think it was in the February, I went for a scan, and he said, "No, it looks like there's enough room between that where the cancer is, and obviously to pass food through." So it kind of wasn't really a worry. And then I was heading towards surgery, and I was planning to have the surgery in the May. So in April, kind of mid-April, I started to feel a bit unwell and not myself, and then started to be sick and started to feel really ill. So again, went to the GP. She said, "Get straight up to A&E." So I went up, and it turned out that my bowel had blocked because of the growth. So they said, "What we'll do is rather than just go straight into surgery, we'll fit a stent into my bowel, which will ultimately open my bowel up, and then we'll allow food to pass through, which then means I can head towards surgery in May." So I had the stent fitted, and when I was having the stent fitted, they put me into like a recovery ward, not recovery bay, I should say. And I just got this excruciating pain down on my left side. and it turned out that the actual stent, the stent had perforated my bowel, which had caused obviously all, the shite, want of a better word, to leak. So I had to have a scan, and then was sent for emergency surgery. And then it was from that because obviously my bowel had perforated, I contracted sepsis, and my family were kind of told that night that I'd be lucky to make the evening based on my condition.
And were you told that as well?
Well, I was out of it. Obviously, I had major surgery. They'd opened me up, so I was completely unaware of it. Really, all I was prior to that was the plan was to, I was probably going to get in a lostomy bag, and they were going to remove it from my bowel as an emergency, and that was that. And so it was. I think I was out of it for about 4 or 5 days in intensive care. Yeah, and luckily it come round.
Well, I'll tell you what, Danny, you are one hell of a fighter, and we've still got more to go. so in you were getting over that, which almost cost you your life, and it's such a huge trauma. In fact, before we move on to the next point, it's almost been like one barrier after another. Well, a fight after a fight with your cancer battle since you were diagnosed. Yeah. Has there ever been a point when you've just wanted to give up?
No, it's really strange actually, like how it gets you really from initial diagnosis. And I was actually speaking with Katie Taylor-Smith, who I know has been previously on one of your shows, and she said when you have like bad news or adversity happens, you almost it kind of makes you want to be a better person in a way, and it also, I don't know, it's kind of give me a new lease of positivity, and I want to do good. So just before all this happened with the heart and the bowel perforating and sepsis, I was actually organising a bowel cancer event as well, because I wanted to give back, do something positive from a negative that I had. So that was all kind of progressing towards May. And then obviously I got the sepsis, and it kind of meant that I was struggling to kind of organise the event, which, at the time isn't a big priority, but it was a very important part for me. And luckily I had some support, and I got out of hospital 2 days, I think it was, before that event, which we then went on to raise, nearly £10,000 for 2 local cancer charities. So I think mentally wise, I did, yeah. I mean, I was probably about 10 stone 5, looked absolutely dreadful, but I think adrenaline. It was quite funny because a few people have said to me on the day, "Oh, you look great" and all that. And then I've seen her a few months later when I'm kind of back to myself, and he said, "Oh, I didn't want to say at the time, but you looked absolutely terrible. You looked like you were on death's door and stuff." But that's people for
you. Literally were as well.
Yeah, exactly. I literally was, yeah, and that's why I look so bad. But yeah, luckily I went to the event, and that's what I mean in terms of mindset. Never really wanted to give up, and in a way, it's motivating me, which we'll come on to. It's motivating me to do better, really.
And then, literally a couple of months later, in June of last year, 2019, you were still in your recovery of what had happened, when you were told your cancer spread to your peritoneum and to get your affairs in order. Firstly, for those people out there that don't know, what is the peritoneum, and how bad is it if cancer spreads there?
Yeah, so it's kind of one of the worst places. It's very similar to like ovarian cancer. So the peritoneum is your stomach lining that sits around, obviously, your stomach. And why it's such a hard place or a bad place for your cancer to go is because it almost kind of like splashes like paint, if you can imagine, and that's how it develops. So it's not just like one growth or 2 growths. It can be a mass of growths, but spread like paint. So again, as soon as you get that diagnosis, he sat me down and had scans, and I think it kind of, not that we can be 100% sure, but I think the spread to the peritoneum had come from the bowel perforation, and then the cancer seedlings that were in my bowel had then leaked into my stomach. So So I had the scan, and yeah, he just said in the meeting, he said, you know, being honest, the way it was worded to me was, if chemotherapy doesn't work, then you're looking at months, which was just, you know, it was hard to take. But again, in the meeting, I was kind of very like, oh, okay, you know, and very like, okay, thanks very much for your time. It wasn't any kind of emotion really up until afterwards. And then I went on Google, and if you put in peritoneum metastasis, then metastasis is like the name for the spread. Then it says, like, you know, life expectancy is 6 months on average. So it was like, wow, what do you do here? And then I started to look at getting my affairs in order, sold my car, the lovely Mercedes, which I was very proud of, and that had to go. And I had to make sure that what I didn't want to happen was something to happen to me, and then people be left behind to kind of say, oh, I've got to sell his car, I've got to do this. So we started to put the wheels in motion on that, really.
Did you know, do any sort of bucket list, Danny?
No, it was just a weird one, because I was going to see friends and family all the time, and I've got family down in Essex, so I'd go down there, and then a friend who lives in Kidderminster, I'd go and see him. But what was really weird about it was I was kind of going out, living every day, and going, I'll go and have a coffee with this person because this might be the last time I go and have coffee with this person. And then weeks pass, and then months pass, and then you're kind of like, what happens if the chemotherapy works? And then I'm 2-3 years down the line, and I'm living my life, and all I'm doing is existing and seeing people because I need to see them. So I soon kind of was speaking with Jane, and she's been an absolute rock. And, you know, through all the sepsis side, you know, she was sleeping by my bed, and, you know, I can never, ever say enough about her, really. But we both said that I needed to get structure back. So I started to come back to work 3 days out of 5, and started to get involved, and that helped. And then we were doing chemotherapy. I went back onto chemotherapy, which was because I'm cardiotoxic, which means that certain chemotherapy drugs can affect my heart, which is why I nearly had the heart attack. I was put onto cardiotoxic friendly chemotherapy, if you like. So my options were restricted on that. So that kind of made me think, oh, you know, this probably isn't going to be good. But I was having chemotherapy and started to feel good. And I don't know, my mindset kind of moved away from that. I'm only going to be here for months into, you know what, this feels okay. And I think we're progressing here to something better, really.
But then you went to Christie's, didn't you, in Manchester, and there were no visible scans on your peritoneum?
So I had a scan, and the scan come back stable in my liver. Clatterbridge said the scan was stable in my peritoneum, so I pushed to get referred over to the Christie in Manchester. And then I got a call. I didn't hear back for about 2 weeks, and then I got a call off my GP at like 9 o'clock at night, just saying, "Have you seen the letter from the Christie?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Well, their radiology." The thing with what I should say before I go on to this bit is, the thing with cancer and reading scans is, you could have 4 or 5 different radiologists into a room, and they could all see different things on a scan. So there's nothing conclusive. But Christie, who are, you know, well-renowned specialists of the peritoneum, they come back, and like I said, the GP called, and she said they've said that there's nothing visible on the scan. Now, you got to tread cautiously on that, because all your intestines move around. Sometimes it can't be seen on a scan, so you've got to kind of take it with a pinch of salt. But the fact that they couldn't see it, and they were saying, you know, we would strongly advise the next step for Daniel be for me to have liver surgery, which was kind of like amazing, because when I was told, obviously, kind of to get my affairs in order, the liver surgery wasn't on the table. It wasn't even in the same conversation. So within 3 months of having chemotherapy, all of a sudden doors were opening, and there was options. which previously weren't there.
And
So it was quite miraculous, really, that the peritoneum wasn't showing on scans based on what I'd been reading, because chemotherapy typically doesn't get rid of it. You see, you have to have a surgery on that particular part of the body. So
this then enabled you to undergo liver surgery, which you did February this year. Just talk me through the surgery, how much of the liver was removed, etc.
Yeah, so I finished chemotherapy, the course chemotherapy, and then I was booked in for February. The plan was I had two options. I could either go to Aintree or via Manchester. Both very different opinions on what the best route was. Manchester's route was felt like the more aggressive way of just removing 60% of the liver, cutting it out. I think I had 5 growths in the liver. So yeah, they said we'll cut it out, and I proceeded with that. And yeah, the surgery went well, and recovery has been good since, really.
So were your liver fully regenerate itself?
Yeah, it grows back in size, but there's ultimately, I think there's 2 different lobes on your liver. So one of the whole of the right side, I think it was removed. So the left side will grow to the same size as the previous liver was, but you do lose some functionality, and your liver's not the same as what it was. So you've got to be careful. But it's still fine, and it's an amazing organ. So it's absolutely fine for me to live a healthy lifestyle, really, with what they've removed and what's regenerated back. Yeah.
So how's your health today at the moment then?
Yeah, so health-wise, like I say, I'm about 8-9 weeks, I said at the very start, 8-9 weeks post-liver surgery, walking every day, doing 10,000 plus steps. Yeah, so I'm doing really well. In terms of the cancer side, it's one of them. When you're stage 4, you when you look at the statistics, I think off the top of my head, I think it's something like 15%. Only 15% of people who are stage 4 will live longer than 5 years. So it's obviously that's quite an eye opener. But so basically I've been told that I'll never ever be cured. There's always a very strong chance it'll come back. So right now I'm in probably the strongest position that I've been in, because I've had it removed out of my bowel. I've had the liver surgery, which obviously hopefully has cut it out from there. And then what was in my peritoneum wasn't showing on scans. So my next step will be in about a month's time to go and get scanned again. And fingers crossed that everywhere is clear. And then that will put me into a position what you call as NED, or no evident disease.
Okay.
And then it'll be a case of me being scanned. I may have some maintenance chemo. I mean, I'm kind of preempting now with what I'm saying, but that would be the perfect scenario for me to be no evident disease and then to manage it from there. But I've seen people who have been NED for 3 months. Others have been NED for 5 years plus. So it's just, in a lot of ways with this kind of game, for me, a lot of people say, it's positivity, it's mental strength and all that. And don't get me wrong, I do think some of that comes into it, but I think a lot of it is down to luck as well, really. Yeah. And no story's the same, but I do think luck plays a massive part in it.
And let's now move on to talk about Team DDB. And when I was reading into this, Danny, I think it characterizes probably the amazing and strong person that you are, and you're so unselfish. You set a foundation up that raises money to make people more aware of bowel cancer, as well as donating to locally based charities. Just tell me, how did that come about?
Yeah, so like I said, I think when I was first diagnosed, I wanted to do some positive. So my plan was to have a bowel cancer awareness event every single year, maybe around a football match, and then an evening with speakers, which is what we did last year. So that was my plan. And then I went out for a meal with two friends, 3 friends, I should say, 2 Bens and Phil, and we were having dinner, and I went to the restroom. And when I come back out, they'd put on t-shirts, bright t-shirts with Team DDB on. So it's like, oh, what's all? It took me about 5 minutes to notice, actually, which was just stupid. But yeah, no, I said, what's all this about? And he said, well, we're going to run Pretty Mother with another guy called Will and a girl called Becky. And it was in Birkenhead Park. We're going to run this, and we're getting sponsored. We've raised over £1,000 for Team DDB, and it kind of evolved from that, really. And that's where it all began. And then when I got the diagnosis that, or I was told that, get your affairs in order, my initial thing was I wanted to, this sounds a bit silly, or it does to me anyway, but I wanted to leave a legacy, if you like, that's, could do good. So obviously Team DDB had come from doing the Pretty Mother, but then I thought, I'll drive this, I'll put it onto social media. We'd already had some good kind of well-known faces, celebrity people pushing the bowel cancer event. So I thought I'll leverage off them, try and get that. And then over the course of the next few months, people like friends and family were doing 10K runs, Halloween trick or treat, Christmas raffles, Movember. So it was just like event after event of just raising money. And where we're up to now, I think we're about 11 months down the line, and we've raised over £26,000 now for local charities, predominantly cancer charities. And then, and then the most recently, we've obviously with COVID-19 and so on, we thought we'd do a fundraiser for the critical care team at Arrow Park Hospital, which was quite poignant, really, because they were the same team of people who'd kind of helped save my life the year before. So there was two elements to it. There was supporting them for that, but obviously supporting them for what they're going through at the moment and the amazing work they're doing. And that we've just gone over £5,000 raised for them. So it's been amazing, really.
So how do you sort of target the local charities, the people, getting to, how can people contact you, basically, if you're a small charity out there?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest with you, we've kind of hand selected, or I'd hand selected the charities based on kind of cancer, really. So we support UCS Foundation, which is a gym based in Hoylake on the Wirral, and the foundation do work with supporting with nutrition and exercise. So that was the primary one that we'd done. Was a guy, I don't know if you've ever heard or you've heard of him, called Dave Bolton, local guy, and he had brain tumor, and he's come through that, survived cancer. And he's got a very, very good story to tell. And I kind of got into UTS because of him, if you like. So, or going there because of him. So I was already getting some exercise and support. And then I just thought it'd be good to give back to them. So that was the first charity. Then we looked after Clatterbridge Cancer Centre because they were building a new hospital in Liverpool. So we supported them. Maggie's Merseyside, which is more of an emotional support for cancer. So it's not really a case of charities coming to us for support. It's more of we've selected charities that fit around the local area but give support back to cancer patients on the Wirral and Merseyside, and that's kind of how we support it, really. The critical care nurses, as I said, has just come off the back of COVID. The initial mindset was just to support cancer charities, but that's just evolved, and I thought we could do good by supporting them too.
How do you fit all this time in? Because obviously you've got a full-time job, you're a family man as well. Is this foundation work, do you almost see it as a therapy for yourself?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's. I mean, to be honest with you, my Mrs. Jane, I think she goes a bit mad about it, really, because I do invest a lot of time into it. So I think from her point of view, and understandably, she selfishly just wants me to focus on doing jobs around the house. But you've hit the nail on the head. It's therapeutic for me. It's something that I get a lot of enjoyment out of, and it's like turning a negative situation into a positive, which I think I've mentioned. The work side has been, I've got my boss Tom. He's been absolutely amazing, very supportive of me throughout the whole process. kind of not put any pressure on me, but also encouraged me to come back to work, to get back involved. He's involved me in stuff. So there's been a good balance, and like I said, amazingly, you do manage to find the time to kind of fit it all in and go into the game as well, or previously go into the game. So.
And obviously, going onto your Instagram, which people can go, just search #Team DDB. You've had some unbelievable high profile people who have promoted your campaign. So especially Juan Mata, who I'm sure you were absolutely made up, he got involved. How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was when I was doing the bowel cancer event. I reached out to a few people, just kind of initially told them like my story and what we were trying to do with the bowel cancer event, and sent it out to a few people on Instagram, and Kwan came back, to be honest, and
wow.
Unbelievably and then he added me as a friend, and he's just unbelievable, really, for somebody to be in his position of being a Premier League footballer with millions of followers, for him to spend the time to, just to drop me a message out of the blue to say, "Hey Danny, how you doing?" It's pretty amazing, really. And we've had all the good support. There's a boxing guy from Manchester, Jamie Moore, who's like boxing trainer, ex-boxer. He's been very supportive of it. Robbie Davis Jr. We've Kim Marsh from Corrie's been supportive. So yeah, I don't want to, obviously you're naming names now, so I don't want to miss it out. But it's been unbelievable, really. Liam Gallagher sent a signed CD to us, and it's unbelievable. Which again meant as much as Quan Mata, because I'm a massive Oasis fan as well. So.
Yeah, good choice of music, Danny. Good choice of music. What is the one thing, getting involved in this, setting up this foundation that so far, even though it's in its infancy stage, that you're most proud of? You thought, you know what, I did real good there. I made change there.
Yeah, there's two elements to that. I think the bowel cancer awareness, which it's also a driving force for that. So to get the message out about don't ignore the symptoms, and it's amazing. You'd be so surprised at how many people will drop me a message and say, "Oh, I've got this feeling in my stomach," or and to be able to kind of direct them and say, go to GP, get it sorted out, is a positive. I think a lot of the feedback we're getting in terms of inspiring people to do. It's funny because I used to be, which I'm sure everyone has their moments, but I used to be very materialistic. I wanted the nice car, the nice watch, all that. To me right now, all that doesn't matter. To me, it's just about friends and family and being the best person you can be and doing good for others, really. And that's kind of one of the big positives that's come from it, really. And then leading from that is friends and family. Friends and family who've supported and have got involved and helped create what Team DDB is. And I probably said about 4 things there when I said there was 2.
No, that's great, Danny. And obviously, with the current lockdown situation that we're in at the moment, even though, as you said, health-wise, you're in the best position that you've been for the last few years. This must be frustrating for you, because it's obviously denying you to be able to go out and do some stuff that you really would have loved to have done. How sort of mentally has it impacted your last few weeks?
Yeah, it's been tough. I think the support of the critical care team has helped with that, because they've allowed me to focus a lot on that, and that's done a lot of good. The feedback I've had from a lot of the team up at Arrow Park and the nurses has been they're telling me that this is lifting spirits. So that makes you feel 10 feet tall, to be able to know that you're doing something that has an impact on other people who are having such a tough time at the moment. It even I shouldn't have done this, but it even inspired me that a year from when I went into critical care, going back a few weeks ago, I actually ran a 5K.
Yes.
I think it was 7 or 8 weeks after. And I did that just on the basis of purely just trying to just show that anything's possible and how far I'd come, and all those people's, how many times I've been written off, to be a year down the line from being told I wouldn't make the night to then run a 5K a year to the day after. Certainly, and as I said, I think for a few days afterwards I had pain in my liver, and I spoke to my liver nurse in Manchester, and she's like, "Oh my God, Danny, what you doing?" And I was just like, "I know, but I just have to do it because I felt well enough to do it, which was lucky enough." So,
and I think it just, it was a big middle finger up to cancer, basically saying, "You're not beating me."
Yeah.
Over the next 12 months, then, regarding Team DDB, what's obviously, when the lockdown's over, what major things have you got planned, major events?
Yeah, so I mean, the one when you're saying there about obviously the impact that it at the moment's had is it's kind of stopped us fundraising as we would generically. But one of the things I did have planned for like May time was to have the next bowel cancer awareness event. So that's obviously been kind of put on the back burner. So once obviously the restrictions are lifted and it's safe enough to do so, then that'll be something that we'll definitely look to do. We've had some people like supporting who said like there was a girl, Yasmin, who was going to do some white collar boxing, put herself completely into, put out of what would normally be a comfortable environment, I should say. She's doing that. Someone's talked about doing a skydive. So there's a lot of individual stuff, but we probably have one team event and then, one big kind of bowel cancer event. And then other than that, it's kind of needs some further thought, really.
I think it's brilliant that you're doing, Danny. One final question. What advice would you give to anyone out there who has just been diagnosed with cancer?
I would say, first of all, stay positive. As you can see, nobody knows what the future holds for you. I think what happens is for the first few days, you feel like it really gets you. And then what you'll find is once you get a plan in place and you've got a course of action, either whether that be chemotherapy or surgery or radiotherapy or immunotherapy or whatever it may well be, once you've got your plan, then just kind of attack it. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is, and someone else who had stage 4 cancer, who I lean on, kind of said, don't worry about what hasn't happened yet, because in your life, I think it's something like 98% of what you worry about won't actually happen. So that's something else that I take from it. Just take every day as it comes. And don't get too far ahead of yourself and worry like, will I be here in 6 months? As you can see from me and from other people, it doesn't always go to how it should go.
So how can
so just keep positive.
And how can people contact yourself and contact Team DDB for advice and to get involved?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways really. There's Facebook and Instagram. So if you're on either those social media, we are possibly looking at a website, but that needs a bit of thought really. But yeah, and it's at team.ddb on both of those social media mediums. So yeah, just have a look and just drop us a message, and then as I said, more than happy to offer support and guidance to anyone who thinks they've got symptoms or has been diagnosed. There's also for bowel cancer, there's a support group on Facebook as well. And again, I've had people reach out to me, say, I've just been diagnosed, and I normally channel them into that group because there's people in exactly the same circumstance as me, and the advice and support you get, and have you spoke to this person, have you tried a second opinion, it's all positive and kind of what you need really, to hear stories of what other people are going through and have come through, if you like.
Yeah, Danny, that's great. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I think using the words inspiring and courageous individual for yourself is a bit of an understatement. Not only a terminal cancer sufferer, but you're also someone who works tirelessly to raise funds, to raise awareness, and to give back to local charities. So I really wish you the best of luck in the future, Danny. Thank you for coming on.
No, thank you for having me, Adam. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
And that was another episode of Behind the Life podcast with myself, Adam Lambert. Please give me a follow on Instagram at Behind the Life podcast, Facebook, Behind the Life podcast, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below as well as the like button. I'll be back soon for another episode. For now, take care.